Enugu was just beginning to wake when Chinidu Okeke stood above the city he had helped build and felt the emptiness no one ever saw. Below him, morning light spilled over Independence Layout, New Haven, and GRA. Cars crowded the roads. Traders opened their shops. Hawkers arranged fruit along busy streets, and construction workers gathered beside unfinished buildings, waiting for trucks loaded with cement and blocks. The whole city was moving, working, surviving. But high above it all, on the top floor of one of Enugu's most luxurious residential towers, Chinidu stood alone before a wall of glass. At 33, he was one of Nigeria's youngest construction billionaires. His company, Okeke Construction Group, had built shopping complexes, luxury hotels, modern hospitals, elegant estates, and even one of the newest flyovers easing traffic across the city. Every major project carried his vision. Every completed building reminded people of his success. Business magazines called him a genius. Television stations called him a visionary. Young entrepreneurs studied his journey like a blueprint for greatness. People admired his discipline, his intelligence, and his rise from poverty to unimaginable wealth. But none of them knew the truth. Behind the money, the awards, and the perfect navy blue suits was a man haunted by the one thing success could never repair. Chinidu had built towers, roads, and hospitals, but he had failed to build a life that felt real. Everyone wanted something from him. Investors wanted access. Politicians wanted favors. Women smiled at his name before they ever knew his heart. And that morning, staring down at the city that worshipped him, Chinidu finally understood the painful truth. He had everything people dreamed of, but no one who truly saw him. Success had brought him everything except peace. Behind the expensive suits, behind the smiling photographs, behind the magazine covers, lived a lonely man. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said quietly. The door opened, and his elderly housekeeper, Mom Gozi, entered carrying a breakfast tray. She had worked for Chinidu since the earliest days of his company. Unlike many employees, she treated him more like a son than a billionaire. "You hardly slept again," she observed as she gently placed the tray on a nearby table. Chinidu smiled faintly. "Was it that obvious?" She folded her arms. "I've watched you grow from a young man sharing one-room apartments with 5 friends. You forget I know when something is troubling you." He walked toward the dining table but made no effort to touch the food. Fresh fruit, toast, eggs, freshly brewed coffee. Everything looked perfect, yet he had no appetite. "Mama and you've barely eaten these past few days. I'm fine." She looked directly into his eyes. "No, you are rich. You are respected, but you are not fine." Her words lingered in the room. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Chinidu exhaled slowly. "Do you know what it feels like when people love your money before they even know your name?" Mom and Goy remained silent. "They smile because of my bank account. They praise me because of my success. They tell me I'm handsome because they know who I am." He laughed bitterly. "But sometimes I wonder if I were poor. Would anyone even notice me?" Mama Gozi walked closer and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "The right woman will." He smiled politely. "I hope you're right." After she left the room, Chinidu stared at his untouched breakfast. Her words brought back memories he had tried hard to forget. 3 years earlier, he had dated a woman named Cynthia. She had seemed perfect, beautiful, educated, elegant. She constantly spoke about building a future together. She introduced him proudly to friends, posted pictures of them online, called him the love of her life. Then one afternoon, while searching for an important document in her apartment, he accidentally overheard a conversation. Cynthia had left her phone connected to a Bluetooth speaker in the living room. She didn't realize he had returned early. Her cheerful voice echoed through the apartment. "My dear, you've won the lottery." Her friend laughed. Cynthia giggled. "I know. Imagine marrying someone worth billions. So, you really love him?" There was a brief pause. Then Cynthia answered with a laugh that still haunted him. "Love, please. Love doesn't pay bills, but his money can buy me anything I want." Both women burst into laughter. Chinidu quietly picked up his car keys. He walked out without making a sound. He never returned. Since then, every relationship had followed the same painful pattern. Some women wanted expensive handbags before they even knew his favorite meal. Others insisted on international vacations after only a few dates. One boldly asked him to buy her a mansion before discussing marriage. Another demanded he register a luxury car in her name, because that was what real love looked like. Every encounter left him emptier than before. Money attracted people, but it also hid their true intentions. Later that morning, Chinidu arrived at the headquarters of Okeke Construction Group. The massive glass building towered over neighboring offices. Employees greeted him respectfully as he entered. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome, Chairman." "Morning, sir." He smiled politely at everyone. His executive assistant, Ioma, hurried toward him, carrying a tablet. "Sir, your schedule is full today." She began reading. 9 meeting with foreign investors. 11 interview with Business Africa. 1 lunch with the governor. 3 project inspection. 5 charity foundation meeting. He nodded. "Let's begin." The entire day passed in a blur. Contracts worth billions of naira were signed. Photographs were taken. Hands were shaken. Promises were exchanged. Everyone admired him. Everyone wanted something from him. By evening, Chinidu felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Instead of heading home, he instructed his driver, "Take me to the Independence Layout Project." The driver looked surprised without informing the site manager. "Sir, yes, I just want to observe." 40 minutes later, the luxury SUV parked quietly beside one of the company's largest construction sites. No one recognized him immediately because he wore a simple cap and sunglasses. He walked slowly around the site. The noise was constant. Hammers struck concrete. Generators roared. Wheelbarrows rolled over uneven ground. Workers lifted blocks onto rising walls. Some mixed mortar. Others climbed scaffolding with incredible balance. Despite the difficult conditions, laughter echoed across the site. One young laborer accidentally spilled sand onto another worker's boots. The victim pretended to chase him with a shovel. Within seconds, dozens of workers burst into laughter. Nearby, an elderly bricklayer shared roasted corn with 3 younger men. Each person took only a few bites before passing it along. Nobody complained. Nobody argued over who deserved more. At lunchtime, the workers gathered beneath a temporary zinc shelter. Some brought homemade meals wrapped in old newspapers. Others bought simple rice and beans from nearby food vendors. Several workers pulled their money so everyone could eat. One man admitted he had no money that day. Another worker immediately split his own meal in half. "There," he said. "We all work together. We all eat together." Chinidu watched silently from a distance. The simple act stunned him. These men earned in a week what he spent on a single dinner with foreign investors. Yet they shared what little they had without hesitation. One worker noticed him standing alone. "Oga, you've been watching us. Come and join us." Chinidu hesitated. "I'm fine," the man laughed. "No one is fine around the smell of hot gel rice." The other workers laughed loudly. One dragged over an empty cement bag for him to sit on. Someone handed him a bottle of water. Another offered him a piece of roasted fish. No one asked his surname. No one asked how much money he had. No one cared. For 30 minutes, he sat among ordinary laborers. They discussed football, their children, the rising cost of food. Funny stories from previous construction jobs. One man joked about how his wife could detect when he secretly bought beer. The others laughed until tears rolled down their faces. Chinidu found himself laughing too, genuinely, not the polite laugh he used during business meetings. A real laugh, one that came from deep inside. When lunch ended, everyone returned to work. As Chinidu walked back toward his vehicle, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. Those men had no luxury cars, no private jets, no designer watches, no bodyguards. Yet they possessed something he had been searching for years: authentic human connection. That night, sleep refused to come. He walked around his enormous penthouse. The silence echoed through rooms that were beautifully furnished but painfully empty. A home cinema, an indoor gym, a heated swimming pool, a wine cellar, private library, every luxury imaginable. Yet, there wasn't a single person waiting to ask how his day had gone. Around midnight, he poured himself a glass of water and stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. His thoughts returned to the construction workers. They had accepted him without asking what he owned, without trying to impress him, without expecting anything in return. Then an impossible idea entered his mind. First he laughed. It sounded ridiculous, completely unrealistic, but the more he considered it, the more it made sense. What if people met him before meeting his wealth? What if he removed every sign that identified him as a billionaire? What if he became ordinary not for one afternoon, Not for one weekend, but for several months. Could he discover who truly valued character over money? Could he finally find someone who would love Chinidu instead of his billions? The following morning, he called only one person, his lawyer and oldest friend, Barrister Emma Obi. They met privately inside Chinidu's office. After listening carefully, Emma leaned back in his chair. "You cannot be serious. I've never been more serious. You want to disappear? For 6 months, you own one of Nigeria's largest construction companies. I know you have projects worth hundreds of billions running across the country. I know, and you want to become." Emma searched for the right words. "A bricklayer." Chinu smiled. "I don't just want to pretend, I want to live like one." His lawyer stared at him in disbelief. "You could get hurt. I've survived worse. You've never laid bricks in your life. I'll learn. And if someone recognizes you, I'll grow a beard, wear old clothes, keep away from places I usually visit." Emma remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. "This may be the craziest idea you've ever had. Probably. But if I don't do this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering whether anyone could ever love me without first seeing my bank balance." His lawyer slowly nodded. "I'll protect the company. I'll keep your secret." Relief spread across Chinidu's face. Within days, preparations quietly began. His luxury wardrobe disappeared into storage. His expensive watches were locked inside a safe. His sports cars remained inside the mansion garage. He rented a tiny one-room apartment in a poor neighborhood under a different name. He purchased faded shirts from a second-hand market, old trousers, used work boots, a worn cap, simple bedding, an old backpack. He even spent hours practicing how laborers carried cement bags and pushed wheelbarrows. Then he stood before a mirror. His beard had grown thick. His expensive haircut was gone. His skin had already darkened slightly from spending time outdoors. Looking back at him was no longer one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires. Looking back was an ordinary young man searching for work. As dawn broke a few days later, Chinidu locked the door of his mansion without looking back. His driver watched in confusion as his employer carried a faded backpack instead of a designer briefcase. No convoy followed. No security officers accompanied him. No luxury SUV waited outside. Only a commercial bus stopped nearby. Chinidu climbed aboard with dozens of strangers. Nobody recognized him. Nobody offered him special treatment. For the first time in many years, he felt invisible. And somehow that was exactly what he had been searching for. The commercial bus rattled through the streets of Enugu, stopping every few minutes to pick up passengers. The conductor shouted destinations at the top of his lungs while squeezing more people into the already crowded vehicle. Albeit a back bed. One more person. Chinidu gripped the metal bar above his head to keep his balance. He had never traveled like this before. For years, he had been driven around in luxury SUVs with tinted windows and armed security escorts. Air conditioning, leather seats, and bottled water had become part of his daily routine. Now he stood shoulder to shoulder with market women carrying baskets of vegetables, students wearing faded backpacks, and laborers already dressed in cement-stained clothes. Nobody recognized him. Nobody greeted him as chairman. Nobody rushed to open the door for him. For the first time in over a decade, Chinidu was simply another passenger trying to get through the morning rush. When the bus finally stopped near Timbershed, one of Enugu's busiest construction areas, Chinidu climbed down and adjusted the old backpack hanging from his shoulder. The smell of wet cement filled the air. Everywhere he looked, buildings were under construction. Workers pushed wheelbarrows loaded with sand. Bricklayers carefully stacked blocks into neat rows. Carpenters measured wooden planks while welders sent bright sparks dancing through the air. The entire neighborhood buzzed with activity. Taking a deep breath, Chinidu walked toward a group of laborers standing beside an unfinished 3-story building. A stocky man wearing a yellow safety helmet looked him over from head to toe. "You looking for work?" "Yes." "Ever worked on a construction site before?" Chinidu hesitated for only a second. "A little?" The supervisor narrowed his eyes. "What can you do?" "I'll do whatever needs to be done." The man shrugged. "We need another laborer. The pay is 8,000 naira for the day. If you slow everyone down, you're gone." Chinidu nodded immediately. "I understand." The supervisor tossed him a faded reflective vest. "Start by helping carry blocks." Within minutes, Chinidu discovered that watching laborers work was completely different from actually doing the job. The first stack of concrete blocks nearly slipped from his hands. Each one felt heavier than he expected. By the time he carried the third load across the site, sweat poured down his face. His arms burned. His shoulders ached. His breathing became heavier with every trip. A young laborer walking beside him laughed. "Easy, my brother. You're carrying them like they're bags of gold." Several workers burst into laughter. Chinidu smiled despite the embarrassment. "I guess I'm still learning." Clearly, the young man extended his hand. "I'm Sola. First day." "Yes, I'm Chinidu. Welcome." Sola grinned. "By evening, you'll either become a real laborer or you'll disappear." The workers laughed again. For the next 3 hours, Chinidu carried blocks, moved bags of cement, fetched water, and swept away broken concrete. His muscles screamed in protest. Several times, he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. But every time he thought about giving up, he reminded himself why he was there. He wasn't searching for comfort, he was searching for truth. Around noon, the scorching Enugu sun became almost unbearable. The temperature seemed to rise with every passing minute. The supervisor blew a whistle. Lunch break. Immediately, the workers gathered beneath a large mango tree near the edge of the site. Some removed their helmets while others washed their hands using water from plastic containers. Chinidu searched his backpack. It was empty. In his excitement that morning, he had forgotten to pack food. He quietly stepped away from the group, hoping no one would notice. Just then, an elderly man called out. "Young man," Chinidu turned. The speaker was a thin, old bricklayer with gray hair peeking beneath a worn cap. Deep lines covered his face, evidence of decades spent under the hot African sun. His hands were rough and cracked, yet his eyes carried unusual warmth. "Come here." Chinidu walked over. The old man opened his lunch container. Inside were 2 large pieces of boiled yam and pepper sauce. "You haven't eaten. I'll be all right." The old man frowned. No laborer works on an empty stomach. He broke 1 piece of yam into half and handed it to Chinidu. "Eat." "I don't want to take your food." The old man smiled. "My son, when God blesses me with food, he expects me to share it." For a moment, Chinidu couldn't speak. The old man barely had enough for himself. Yet, he was willingly giving away half. Slowly, Chinidu accepted the meal. "Thank you. My name is Musa. Most people here call me Papa Musa." "I'm Chinidu." Papa Musa nodded. "I know you introduced yourself this morning." The old man laughed softly. "You'll learn something about construction. It isn't only about laying blocks. It's about looking after one another." Those simple words stayed with Chinidu long after lunch ended. The afternoon proved even more difficult than the morning. The workers began mixing mortar. Huge piles of sand and cement had to be combined with water until they formed a thick mixture. The supervisor handed Chinidu a shovel. "Mix." He pushed the shovel into the pile. Nothing prepared him for how heavy wet mortar could become. After only 15 minutes, his back ached. His palms began developing painful blisters. Every movement became harder than the last. Papa Musa noticed. Instead of laughing, the elderly bricklayer walked over. "No, you're using too much strength." He gently repositioned Chinidu's hands. Construction isn't about fighting the shovel. It's about working with it. He demonstrated slow, controlled movements. "Let the shovel do the work." Chinidu copied him. Immediately the task became easier there. Papa Musa smiled. "Much better. Thank you," the old man chuckled. "You remind me of my grandson. He also tried to fight the shovel." "What happened?" "He lost." Both men laughed. As the afternoon continued, Papa Musa taught Chinidu countless small lessons. How to balance a stack of blocks without dropping them. How to wheel heavy loads across uneven ground. How to conserve energy during long hours. How to protect his back while lifting cement bags. The lessons weren't found in engineering textbooks. They were lessons earned through 40 years of hard labor. When work finally ended around 5 inches the evening, Chinidu could barely move. Every muscle in his body hurt. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat. Dust covered his face. His boots felt twice as heavy as when the day began. The supervisor walked around paying each laborer. When he reached Chinidu, he counted 8 crisp 1,000 naira notes into his hand. "There, you survived." The workers applauded jokingly. Zola laughed. "I honestly thought you'd run away before lunch." "So did I." Everyone burst into laughter. For Chinidu, however, the money felt strangely significant. 8,000 naira. As a billionaire, he had once spent more than that on a cup of imported coffee during business trips abroad. He had tipped hotel staff amounts larger than an entire day's wage for these laborers without thinking twice. Now he understood what those 8,000 naira truly represented. 8 hours of exhausting physical labor. Sweat, pain, blisters, sunburn, dedication. He folded the money carefully and slipped it into his pocket. It felt more valuable than many of the million naira payments he had received in boardrooms. Walking home, Chinidu passed a roadside restaurant. The aroma of fried plantain and stew filled the air. His stomach growled loudly. He entered and ordered the cheapest meal available: rice, beans, a small piece of fish. The woman serving him smiled kindly. "Long day," he nodded. "My first." She laughed knowingly. "It gets easier." "I hope so." After finishing his meal, he continued toward the tiny room he had rented. Compared to his mansion, it was almost unimaginable. The walls showed cracks. The ceiling fan made a loud, rattling noise whenever it turned. The mattress was thin. The bathroom was shared with 3 neighboring tenants. There was no swimming pool, no elevator, no private cinema, no luxurious furniture, just a small bed, plastic chair, a single wooden table, and one tiny window overlooking the street. Yet, strangely, the room didn't feel empty, felt honest. After taking a cold bath from a plastic bucket, Chinidu sat carefully on the edge of the bed. The blisters on his palms stung intensely. He examined them quietly. These were the first genuine work blisters he had ever earned. His phone buzzed. It was a secure message from his lawyer, Barrister Emma. "Everything is under control. The board believes you're on an extended international business trip. The company is running smoothly. Don't worry about anything here." Chinidu smiled faintly before putting the phone away. He wasn't worried about the company. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about contracts or shareholders or profits. He was thinking about Papa Musa, about Sola, about the laborers who laughed despite earning so little, about the old man who had willingly shared half of his lunch. The next morning, Chinidu returned to the construction site before sunrise. This time, he felt slightly more confident. The workers greeted him warmly. "Look who came back. I told you he'd survive." "Morning, Chinidu." He smiled. "Morning." As the days turned into weeks, life settled into a routine. Wake before dawn, ride crowded buses, carry blocks, mix mortar, push wheelbarrows, learn from Papa Musa, laugh with Sola, eat simple meals, sleep early. His body slowly adapted. The painful blisters hardened into calluses. His shoulders became stronger. He no longer struggled to carry heavy loads. Even the supervisor noticed. "You've improved." "Thank you. Keep it up." Every evening, the workers gathered to talk before heading home. They discussed football matches, their children's school fees, the increasing price of cement, their dreams of one day owning small houses. One rainy afternoon, while everyone waited beneath a shelter for the storm to pass, Sola turned to Chinidu. "So, what did you do before this job?" The question caught him off guard. He couldn't tell them he owned one of Nigeria's biggest construction companies. Thinking quickly, he answered carefully. "I worked in an office. What happened?" "The company closed." Sola shook his head sympathetically. "Sorry." Papa Musa nodded. "Life changes quickly, but honest work never disgraces a man." The old bricklayer looked directly at Chinidu. "Remember that." Those words touched something deep inside him. For years, he had measured success through balance sheets, billionaire contracts, and luxury properties. Now, an elderly bricklayer had given him a lesson far more valuable than any business seminar. There was dignity in honest work. Whether a man wore an expensive Italian suit or dusty work clothes stained with cement, his value came from his character, not his bank account. As another workday ended, Chinidu stood quietly beside the unfinished building, watching the sun disappear behind the hills surrounding Enugu. His hands were rough, his clothes were covered in dust, his muscles were sore. By every outward appearance, he looked like an ordinary bricklayer. Yet inside, something extraordinary had begun to happen. Each passing day stripped away another layer of pride, another layer of comfort, another layer of the identity the world had built around his wealth. For the first time since becoming a billionaire, Chinidu wasn't living behind titles or expensive possessions. He was living as a man among ordinary people. And though he did not yet realize it, this dusty construction site was about to lead him to the greatest treasure of his life: A woman whose heart could not be bought with billions. 3 weeks had passed since Chinidu exchanged his billionaire lifestyle for the dusty world of construction work. By now, the blisters that had once covered his palms had become thick calluses. His shoulders had grown stronger, and his body had adapted to lifting heavy blocks, pushing loaded wheelbarrows, and mixing cement beneath the scorching Enugu sun. The workers no longer laughed whenever he picked up a shovel. Instead, they treated him like one of their own. Every morning, Sola greeted him with a cheerful smile. "Morning, chairman of blocks." The nickname had started as a joke because Chinidu always arranged blocks into perfectly straight piles. Unlike the other laborers who simply stacked them carelessly, the irony never escaped him. If only they knew he was actually the chairman of the company that owned the project. Chinidu laughed each time he heard the nickname. "I'll soon be promoted to managing director of cement." The workers burst into laughter. Even Papa Musa wiped tears from his eyes. "You finally learned how to joke," the elderly bricklayer said. "I was beginning to think office work had stolen your sense of humor." Chinidu smiled. Maybe construction work brought it back. The truth was he had not laughed this freely in years. His days were no longer filled with tense board meetings, endless negotiations, or carefully rehearsed speeches for investors. Instead, they were filled with genuine conversations, harmless jokes and friendships, built on shared struggles rather than business opportunities. One Wednesday afternoon, just before the lunch whistle sounded, a delicious aroma drifted across the construction site. Someone sniffed the air dramatically. "Ah, Amara is here." Immediately, several workers became excited. Sola grinned. "If you haven't eaten her food before, today is your lucky day." The supervisor blew his whistle. Lunch break. Within seconds, dozens of laborers headed toward a small roadside food stall located beneath a large mango tree just outside the site. Curious, Chinidu followed them. The stall was simple. A wooden table, 2 large cooking pots resting on charcoal stoves, plastic chairs arranged beneath a blue canopy, a cooler filled with soft drinks and sachet water. Yet, despite its modest appearance, the place was overflowing with customers. At the center of it all stood a young woman wearing a simple yellow Ankara apron over a blue blouse. She moved quickly between customers serving steaming plates of rice, beans, pounded yam, vegetable soup, and fried fish. Her long black hair was neatly tied beneath a colorful scarf. Her caramel skin glowed beneath the afternoon sunlight. There was nothing flashy about her appearance. No expensive jewelry, no heavy makeup, no designer handbag. Yet something about her immediately caught Chinidu's attention. Perhaps it was her smile. It wasn't the polite smile customer service workers often forced themselves to wear. It was warm, natural, the kind of smile that made people feel welcome. Every customer received the same cheerful greeting. "Good afternoon. Welcome. How was work today?" She laughed easily with the laborers, teasing some of them like old friends. One customer admitted he had forgotten his spoon. She laughed and handed him another without complaint. Another worker accidentally spilled soup on the table. Instead of getting angry, she simply smiled. "It happens, we'll clean it." Watching her, Chinidu found himself smiling. There was something peaceful about her. When it was finally his turn, she looked up. Their eyes met for the first time. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. "What would you like?" Her voice was soft yet confident. Chinidu glanced at the food. "The rice looks good. It tastes even better. I'll trust your recommendation," she smiled. "1 plate of rice with stew and fish?" "Yes." She served the food generously before placing it before him. "Enjoy." He reached into his pocket. His smile disappeared, empty. His heart sank. That morning, he had changed into another pair of work trousers and forgotten to transfer the little cash he had earned the previous day. For several seconds, he searched every pocket. Nothing. Behind him, other customers waited patiently. Embarrassment washed over him. "I'm sorry. I forgot my money." He expected annoyance, perhaps suspicion. Instead, the young woman simply tilted her head. "Is this your first time here?" "Yes." She smiled gently. "Then, welcome." She pushed the plate slightly closer to him. "You can pay tomorrow." Chinidu blinked. "No, I'll come back later. You've worked all morning. You're hungry." She folded her arms. "I'm feeding a hungry man. I'm not opening a bank." Several workers nearby left. Sola called out from another table. "Don't worry, she trusts everybody." Papa Musa chuckled. "That's why everyone loves eating here." Still uncomfortable, Chinidu looked back at the young woman. What if I never return? She smiled. Then I would have helped someone who needed help, and I won't regret that. Her answer caught him completely off guard. In the corporate world he lived in, almost every favor came with conditions. People measured every action against potential profit, but this woman had just handed a complete stranger a meal without asking for anything in return. He sat quietly and began eating. The food was delicious. The rice was perfectly cooked. The stew carried just enough spice. The fried fish was crispy on the outside and tender inside. He looked toward the young woman again. She was helping an elderly customer carry a heavy container to his motorcycle. A little girl approached the stall with a school bag hanging from one shoulder. The child looked nervous. Auntie Amara, I only have 500 naira. The meal normally cost more. Without hesitation, Amara smiled. What class are you in now? Primary 5. And your exams? I came first. Amara clapped happily. That's wonderful. She filled a takeaway container until it overflowed. But the little girl stared at the food. This is too much. You need to grow into a doctor one day. The child smiled brightly. Thank you. Watching the scene, Chinidu felt something stir inside him. This wasn't generosity performed for social media. There were no cameras, no reporters, no publicity, just genuine kindness. When lunch ended, Chinidu approached the stall again. I'll bring the money tomorrow. She nodded. I know. He hesitated. I never asked your name. I'm Amara. She extended her hand. He shook it gently. I'm Chinidu. Nice to meet you. You too? As he walked back toward the site, Sola nudged him playfully. So, what do you think about what? Our food. It's excellent. Sola laughed. I wasn't talking about the food. Papa Musa smiled knowingly. Our Amara has a good heart. Another laborer joined the conversation. She lost her father 2 years ago. Really? Sola nodded. He was a bricklayer, one of the best around here. When he died, she took over feeding workers because it was their family's only source of income, and she still helps her younger brother stay in school. Chinidu listened quietly. The more he heard, the more he admired her. The following morning, before heading to work, Chinidu stopped at a nearby ATM. He withdrew enough money to repay his debt. During lunch break, he walked straight to Amara's stall. She looked up and smiled. I knew you'd come. He placed the money on the table. For yesterday, she counted it quickly before placing the notes inside a small metal cash box. Thank you. He remained standing. You trusted me. She laughed softly. I trusted my instincts. And they were right. I appreciate it. You don't have to. She handed him his meal. What matters is that you came back. From that day onward, Chinidu ate at Amara's stall every afternoon. Little by little, they began talking. At first, their conversations lasted only a few minutes. How was work today? Very tiring. You'll get stronger. What did you cook today? Guess. He usually guessed wrong. She laughed every time. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations became longer. She learned that Chinidu had once worked in an office before losing his job. That part wasn't entirely false. He simply omitted the detail that he had owned the office. He discovered that Amara woke every morning at 4 to prepare food before opening the stall. After lunch, she cleaned everything herself before returning home to help her younger brother with homework. She rarely complained, even when business was slow, even when customers delayed payment. One rainy afternoon, dark clouds covered the sky just as the workers arrived for lunch. Within minutes, heavy rain poured down. Everyone squeezed beneath the canopy. Water leaked through one corner. The wind blew rain onto the tables. Several customers rushed away. Amara remained calm. She quickly covered the cooking pots with lids. Then she noticed an elderly woman struggling to cross the muddy road while carrying groceries. Without hesitation, Amara removed her apron and ran into the rain. She helped the woman carry the heavy bags all the way across the street before returning completely soaked. You'll catch a cold, Chinidu said. She laughed while wringing water from her scarf. I'll survive. What if she had fallen? He stared at her. Most people would have stayed dry and minded their own business. Amara hadn't even paused to think. Helping someone simply came naturally to her. That evening, after work ended, Chinidu noticed one of the plastic tables at the stall wobbling badly. One leg had cracked. Customers struggled to eat comfortably. Without saying anything, he picked up a few leftover pieces of wood from the construction site. "What are you doing?" Amara asked. "Give me 30 minutes." Using a hammer, nails, and simple tools borrowed from the carpenters, he repaired the broken leg. He reinforced the frame until the table stood firmly again. Amara tested it carefully. "It feels brand new." He smiled. "It should last a long time." She looked genuinely grateful. "Thank you." "It wasn't much." "It was." She looked around her modest stall. "Most people only come here to eat." "You stayed to help." Chinidu shrugged. "I've always liked fixing things." She laughed. "Then I may have more work for you." He laughed too. "Let's negotiate my salary. A plate of rice, only one, and an extra piece of meat. Now you're becoming expensive." Both of them left. From across the road, Papa Musa watched everything with a knowing smile. Solo walked over. "What are you smiling about?" Papa Musa folded his arms. "Have you noticed?" "Noticed what?" "Our office worker smiles differently these days." Sola glanced toward Chinidu and Amara, who were still laughing together beside the repaired table. He grinned. "I think you're right." Papa Musa nodded slowly. "Sometimes the strongest buildings begin with a single brick, and sometimes the strongest love begins with a single act of kindness." Neither Chinidu nor Amara heard the old man's words. They were too busy talking, too busy discovering pieces of each other's lives. Neither of them realized that destiny had quietly begun laying the foundation of something extraordinary. Chinidu had come to the construction site, searching for a woman who would love him without knowing he was wealthy. He had expected the search to take months, perhaps even years. Yet, standing beneath a simple roadside canopy, sharing laughter over a repaired table and a plate of homemade food, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. For the first time since leaving his luxurious mansion, the lonely billionaire beneath the dusty clothes looked forward to tomorrow. Not because of the work waiting at the construction site, but because he knew that at lunchtime, a young woman with a gentle heart and a warm smile would be waiting beneath the mango tree. The weeks slipped by so quietly that Chinidu hardly noticed how much his life had changed. Every morning before sunrise, he left the tiny room he had rented in the neighborhood. He would walk to the bus stop with other laborers carrying worn-out backpacks and lunch containers. Together they squeezed into crowded commercial buses that bounced over potholes as they made their way toward the construction site. Not long ago, his mornings had begun very differently. A chauffeur would wait outside his mansion with a polished black SUV. His assistant would already have his day schedule prepared. His phone would be filled with emails from executives, foreign investors, and government officials. Now the first thing he heard every morning was the cheerful voice of Sola shouting across the bus stop, "Chairman of Blocks." The nickname had become permanent. Chinidu laughed. "Morning Vice President of Wheelbarrows." The other laborers burst into laughter. Even before reaching the site, they were already joking with one another. It amazed Chinidu how people with so little could carry so much joy. When they arrived, everyone immediately got to work. The building that had once been only a foundation was beginning to rise proudly toward the sky. Every day, another row of blocks was laid. Concrete pillars stretched higher, rooms slowly took shape. Standing back one afternoon, Chinidu admired the progress. He had overseen hundreds of construction projects in his career, but this one felt different. This time he wasn't watching from an air-conditioned office. He was carrying the blocks himself. He could feel every ounce of sweat that went into each wall. He finally understood what his workers experienced every single day. That realization humbled him more than any business seminar ever had. Around noon, the familiar whistle announced lunch break. Like clockwork, the laborers headed toward the roadside food stall beneath the large mango tree. The moment Amara saw them approaching, her face brightened. "You're all late today." Sola grinned. "Blame the supervisor. He suddenly remembered he owns our afternoon too." Everyone laughed. Amara quickly began serving plates of steaming rice and beans. When Chinidu reached the front of the line, she smiled. "I already know what you want." "Oh." She handed him a plate. "Rice, extra stew, one piece of fish, and don't forget your bottled water." He looked at her surprised. "You remembered?" She laughed softly. "You've been eating here every day for almost a month. If I don't know your order by now, then I'm running the wrong business." For reasons he couldn't explain, that simple statement warmed his heart. Someone had remembered something about him. Not because he was wealthy, not because he was famous, simply because she paid attention. As everyone ate, Amara moved from table to table asking customers if they needed anything. She spoke to each person with the same kindness. No one received special treatment. No one was ignored. Even when customers complained that the stew was too spicy or the rice wasn't hot enough, she responded patiently, "Well, do better tomorrow." Watching her, Chinidu realized something. Kindness wasn't something Amara switched on when convenient. It was part of who she was. After lunch, as the workers prepared to return to the site, Chinidu noticed one of the wooden benches had cracked. Several nails had come loose. Without saying anything, he picked up a hammer left nearby and repaired it before leaving. Amara watched from behind the stall. "You really enjoy fixing things?" He smiled. "I suppose I do. You never charge me?" He shrugged. "I'm already being paid." She frowned playfully. "By who?" He pointed toward the plate he had just emptied. "You're cooking," she laughed. "That isn't enough. It is for me." Later that evening, after work had ended, Chinidu deliberately walked a little slower. He noticed Amara struggling to fold the large canopy that protected the food stall. The frame had become bent after months of use. Without asking permission, he walked over. "Need help?" She looked relieved. "Please." Together, they folded the canopy. Then, they carried heavy cooking pots into the small storage shed behind the stall. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know, but I want to." For the first time since they met, there were no customers around, noisy laborers, just the two of them. The quiet felt strangely comfortable as they locked the shed. Amara smiled. "Thank you. My younger brother usually helps me." "Where is he?" "He has evening classes." "What is he studying?" "He wants to become an engineer." Chinidu smiled. "That's impressive. He says one day he'll design buildings all over Nigeria." She laughed proudly. "He dreams very big. You should never laugh at big dreams." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like someone who has dreamed big before." He quickly caught himself. "I used to." She nodded thoughtfully. The conversation shifted naturally. They began walking toward the nearby bus stop together. The evening breeze carried the smell of roasted corn from roadside vendors. Children played football in an open field. Motorcycles sped past. The city seemed calmer than usual. So, Amara asked, "What did you do before construction?" The question made Chinidu's heartbeat quicken. He had rehearsed this answer many times. "I worked in administration." "What happened?" "The company downsized." "I'm sorry." "It's all right. It forced me to start over." She smiled gently. "Sometimes life pushes us somewhere better." Those words lingered in his mind. If only she knew how true they were. They reached the bus stop. The buses were unusually delayed. People waited patiently beneath a faded shelter. To pass the time, they continued talking. "What do you enjoy doing?" Chinidu asked. Amara thought for a moment. "Cooking? I guess that." She laughed. "I also like reading." "Really?" She nodded. "My father loved books. He used to say that every book teaches you something, even if it's only how not to live." "What kinds of books?" "Biographies. I enjoy reading about ordinary people who achieve extraordinary things." Chinidu smiled quietly. "So do I." Before long, the bus arrived. As they climbed aboard, the vehicle was already crowded. There was only one empty seat. Chinidu stepped aside. "You take it." "What about you?" "I'll stand." She hesitated. "You've been carrying blocks all day." "So have you." Finally, she sat down. Throughout the journey, she occasionally looked up to see if he was all right. Each time he smiled reassuringly. When they reached her stop, she stood. "Good night, Chinidu." "Good night, Amara." As she walked away, he found himself watching until she disappeared around the corner. Sola, who had been sitting near the back of the bus, leaned forward with a grin. "So," Chinidu pretended not to understand. "So, what? You like her?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? You've repaired her tables? You help close her shop? You carry her cooking pots? You even gave up your seat?" Several passengers laughed. Chinidu shook his head. "She's just a friend." Sola burst into laughter. "My friend, I've seen that look before." "What look?" "The one men get when they've already lost their hearts." The following Saturday, work ended earlier than usual. Most of the laborers hurried home. As Chinidu prepared to leave, Papa Musa approached him. Walk with me." The two men slowly made their way toward a nearby roadside where old trees provided shade from the afternoon sun. Papa Musa bought 2 roasted corn cobs from a vendor and handed one to Chinidu. "Thank you." For several minutes, they ate in silence. Then the elderly man spoke. "You're changing." Chinidu looked surprised. "In what way?" "When you first came here, you looked like someone carrying a heavy load. You smiled very little. You trusted no one. And now," Papa Musa smiled knowingly, "now you smile before people greet you. You laugh, you work harder." And every afternoon he glanced toward Amara's food stall. "Your eyes keep searching for one particular person." Chinidu lowered his head slightly. "Is it that obvious?" The old man chuckled. "To an old man who has been married for 43 years. Very." Chinidu smiled. "I've never met anyone like her." Papa Musa nodded. "She's a good girl. I can see that. But be careful." "Why?" "The heart is like fresh cement. It is soft at first. But once it hardens, it becomes difficult to change." Chinidu quietly reflected on those words. That evening, instead of returning immediately to his room, he stopped near a small roadside market. He noticed a carpenter selling handmade wooden shelves. One simple shelf caught his attention. He remembered seeing Amara stack cooking ingredients on unstable plastic crates behind the stall. Without thinking much, he bought the shelf. The next morning, he carried it to the food stall before work began. Amara looked surprised. "What's this?" "I noticed you needed somewhere better to keep your spices." She stared at the wooden shelf. "You bought this?" He nodded. "It wasn't expensive." For several seconds, she said nothing. Finally, she looked up. "No one has ever noticed something so small." "It's not small. It will make your work easier." Her eyes softened. "Thank you." Instead of immediately placing it inside the stall, she carefully dusted the shelf with a clean cloth. Then she arranged her spices, seasoning cubes, and cooking utensils neatly across it. She stepped back and smiled. "It looks beautiful. I'm glad." For the rest of the morning, Chinidu couldn't stop smiling. Later that afternoon, as customers began leaving after lunch, Amara quietly walked over carrying a small food container. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it later." He looked confused. "Why?" "Because if you open it now, everyone will want one." Curious, he waited until returning to the construction site. Inside were several pieces of fried plantain and grilled chicken. Attached was a small handwritten note. "Thank you for always helping without expecting anything back." For a long time, Chinidu simply stared at the note. No expensive gift he had ever received had touched him this deeply. Back when everyone knew him as a billionaire, women had often given him costly watches, designer ties, and luxury perfumes. Many of those gifts came with hidden expectations. This simple container of food, prepared by someone who barely earned enough to support herself, felt infinitely more valuable. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills surrounding Enugu, Chinidu stood outside his tiny rented room holding the note in his hands. He realized something that both frightened and excited him. This was no longer a simple experiment. He wasn't merely pretending to be a bricklayer to observe how people treated him. Somewhere between carrying cement bags, repairing broken tables, sharing crowded buses, and eating homemade meals beneath a mango tree, his carefully guarded heart had begun to surrender, not to wealth, not to beauty alone, but to kindness, to humility, to a woman who saw dignity in ordinary people. A woman who smiled at everyone, whether they could afford to pay or not. A woman who thanked him for fixing a simple shelf as though he had given her the world. For the first time in many years, Chinidu found himself looking forward to each new day, not because of another billionaire contract or the opening of a grand new building, but because every sunrise brought another chance to spend a few precious moments with Amara. Without realizing it, the lonely billionaire had started laying the strongest foundation of his life, not with cement, not with bricks, but with trust, kindness, shared laughter, and the quiet hope that perhaps, just perhaps, true love had finally found him beneath the dust. The rainy season had finally settled over Enugu. Dark clouds drifted across the sky almost every afternoon, and the scent of wet earth lingered in the air after each downpour. Construction work continued despite the unpredictable weather. The laborers simply worked around the rain, covering bags of cement with tarpaulins and waiting patiently whenever the storms became too heavy. For Chinidu, every day followed a familiar rhythm. Wake before dawn, board a crowded bus, spend hours carrying blocks and mixing mortar, Then look forward to the one part of the day that made every aching muscle worthwhile. Lunch at Amara's food stall. It had become more than just a place to eat. It had become the happiest part of his day. As soon as the lunch whistle sounded, Chinidu instinctively looked toward the mango tree where the small stall stood. Almost every afternoon, Amara would already be waiting. The moment she saw the workers approaching, her face lit up with the same warm smile. "You're all hungry today," she would joke. "Were we ever not hungry?" Solo would reply. The workers always laughed. Amara had become like family to many of them. She knew who preferred beans instead of rice, who disliked pepper, who often forgot to bring enough money. She never embarrassed anyone. Instead, she quietly kept a small notebook beneath the counter, where she recorded unpaid meals. Some laborers settled their debts at the end of the week, others took longer. She trusted them anyway. One afternoon, as Chinidu finished eating, he noticed an elderly laborer searching every pocket of his worn trousers. The man's face slowly fell. "My money! I must have lost it." Without saying a word, Amara closed the notebook. "It's all right. You can pay another time." The old man shook his head. "I already owe you," she smiled gently. "Then today? Well, call it my contribution." "No, I can't." "You can." She placed a bottle of water beside him. "You've worked too hard to leave here hungry." The old man lowered his head. "God will bless you, my daughter." Watching the exchange, Chinidu felt the familiar warmth spread through his heart. She did these things naturally. Not because anyone was watching, not because she expected praise. Helping people simply seemed to be part of who she was. Later that afternoon, after work ended, Chinidu stayed behind to help Amara pack away her tables. "You'll spoil your customers," he teased. She looked up. "What do you mean?" "If you keep giving away free meals, they'll stop paying." She laughed. "They know I can't afford that. So, why do you keep doing it?" She paused for a moment before answering. "When my father was alive, he always said something. What if someone is hungry? Feed them first. You can discuss money later." Chinidu smiled. "He sounds like a wise man." He was. She carefully folded one of the plastic tablecloths. He also believed that kindness always finds its way back. "You believe that too?" "I have to." She looked around the modest stall. "If I stop believing people are good, then this business becomes very difficult." Her words stayed with him long after he left. That night, lying on the thin mattress in his rented room, Chinidu couldn't stop thinking about her. Every day, he discovered another reason to admire her. It wasn't simply her beauty, though he certainly noticed how her eyes sparkled whenever she laughed, or how the evening sunlight often highlighted the gentle features of her face. No, it was something deeper. She possessed the rare ability to make everyone around her feel important. Whether she was speaking to a child buying a soft drink or an elderly laborer ordering beans, she treated everyone with the same respect. Money never influenced the way she behaved. The next morning, the construction site buzzed with unusual excitement. A large convoy of luxury vehicles drove slowly past the unfinished building. The workers stopped briefly to watch. 3 black SUVs, a white Range Rover, 2 police escort vehicles. Solo whistled. "Someone important." The supervisor nodded. "Probably another politician." The convoy disappeared around the corner. Chinidu barely paid attention. Luxury cars no longer impressed him. He had owned more expensive vehicles himself. By lunchtime, the excitement had been forgotten. The workers gathered beneath the mango tree as usual. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until the sound of another expensive engine echoed down the road. This time, it stopped directly in front of Amara's food stall. Every conversation suddenly paused. A gleaming white Mercedes-Benz rolled to a gentle stop. Its paint reflected the afternoon sunlight. The driver quickly stepped out and opened the rear passenger door. A young man wearing an expensive tailored suit climbed out. His polished shoes had probably never touched construction dust before. A gold wristwatch glimmered beneath his sleeve. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes. He glanced briefly at the surroundings before walking toward the stall. Several laborers exchanged curious looks. Solo whispered quietly, "I don't think he's here for rice." The stranger removed his sunglasses. He smiled confidently. "Good afternoon." Amara looked slightly surprised. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. I've heard wonderful things about your cooking." She smiled politely. "I hope whoever told you wasn't exaggerating. I'll be the judge of that." The workers chuckled softly. The man glanced at the cooking pots. "I'll take 1 plate of everything." Amara blinked. Everything. Everything. Within minutes, she had prepared several plates: rice, beans, fried plantain, pounded yam, vegetable soup, fish, chicken. The man sampled each dish carefully. After a few bites, he smiled broadly. "This is incredible. Thank you." He reached into his wallet and handed her several crisp 1,000 naira notes. She quickly counted them. "Sir, this is far too much. Keep the change." "I can't." "You can." He smiled. "Think of it as appreciation." She hesitated before reluctantly accepting. The workers watched the exchange quietly. The stranger looked around. "How many laborers usually eat here?" "About 40. He smiled. "Good. Today's lunch is on me." The workers stared in disbelief. "What?" Solo whispered. "Did he just say free food?" The man nodded. "Everyone eats. My treat." Cheers erupted beneath the canopy. Several workers clapped enthusiastically. Amara looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." She thanked him sincerely before serving the excited laborers. Most of them praised the generous visitor. Only Chinidu remained unusually quiet. Something about the situation unsettled him. After everyone finished eating, the stranger walked back toward Amara. "My name is Emma." She smiled politely. "I'm Amara. I was hoping you might have dinner with me sometime." The entire stall became silent. Several laborers pretended not to listen while listening very carefully. Amara looked genuinely surprised. "I'm sorry. I don't think that would be appropriate." Emma smiled confidently. "I promise I'm harmless. I appreciate the invitation, but no." Her answer was calm, respectful, firm. Emma seemed slightly disappointed. "I understand." He handed her a business card. "If you ever change your mind, call me." She accepted it politely. "I'll think about it." With that, he returned to his luxury car. Moments later, the Mercedes disappeared down the road. The workers immediately began talking. "Did you see that car? That suit alone could pay my rent." He bought everyone lunch. Solo looked toward Chinidu. "You've gone quiet. I'm just tired." "Tired?" Solo laughed. "You look like someone whose favorite football team just lost." Chinidu forced a smile. "It's nothing," but it wasn't nothing. For the first time since meeting Amara, he felt something he hadn't expected: jealousy. Not because Emma was wealthy. Wealth meant very little to Chinidu. Now, what troubled him was much deeper. He feared that eventually Amara might discover the easier life Emma could offer. Expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, beautiful cars, everything Chinidu himself owned but could not reveal. That evening, while walking home alone, his thoughts refused to settle. Would she eventually choose comfort? Could he blame her if she did? He was asking her to unknowingly fall in love with someone she believed was an ordinary bricklayer, earning barely enough to survive. He had chosen this disguise himself, yet now it suddenly felt unfair. The following afternoon, Emma returned. This time he arrived carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. The workers exchanged knowing smiles. Sola nudged Chinidu gently. "Looks like someone has competition." Chinidu ignored the comment. Emma approached the stall confidently. "These are for you." Amara looked embarrassed. "Sir, you really didn't have to. I wanted to." She accepted the flowers politely but placed them on a nearby table instead of holding them. "I came to ask again." "Dinner." She smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry. My answer hasn't changed. You don't even know me." "Exactly. That's why I don't think dinner makes sense." Emma laughed softly. "Fair point. What if we simply became friends first?" She shook her head gently. "I don't think that's a good idea either." He looked disappointed. "I admire your honesty. Thank you." He left peacefully. No argument, no pressure. After he drove away, Chinidu quietly resumed eating. Inside, however, his emotions battled one another. Part of him felt relieved. Another part felt guilty. He had no right to judge another man for pursuing someone he cared about, especially when he himself wasn't being truthful. Later that evening, after helping Amara close the stall, they walked toward the bus stop together. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Amara broke the silence. "You've been unusually quiet today." "Have I?" "Yes." She smiled. "Did the cement finally defeat you?" He laughed softly. "No. Something else then? He hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. What if? He searched carefully for the right words. Someone wealthy wanted to marry you? She looked surprised. That's an unusual question. Just answer honestly. She thought for a moment. Wealth isn't a bad thing. He nodded. No, but money alone doesn't make someone a good husband. What matters then? She smiled gently. Character, respect, kindness, peace. She looked ahead as they continued walking. My parents weren't rich. We lived in a small house, but my father treated my mother like a queen. I grew up believing that's what love should look like. Chinidu listened silently. She continued, I've seen rich marriages filled with unhappiness. I've also seen poor couples who laugh together every evening. I know which one I'd choose. Her answer eased something inside him, but only slightly. He still couldn't ignore one painful reality. She was speaking to a man she believed was poor. Would she feel the same after discovering he had lied about his identity? Would she see his deception as betrayal? Or would she understand why he had hidden the truth? That question haunted him throughout the night. The following Saturday, work ended early because heavy rain flooded part of the construction site. The laborers gathered beneath a temporary shelter, waiting for the rain to stop. Sola suddenly leaned closer to Chinidu. So what? You like Amara? Chinidu smiled. I've told you before, we're friends. Solo laughed loudly. My friend, you watch her the way hungry people watch food. Several workers burst into laughter. Even Papa Musa smiled knowingly. Chinidu shook his head. You people imagine too much. Papa Musa looked at him thoughtfully. No, we simply have old eyes that notice young hearts. Everyone laughed again. Chinidu joined them, but deep inside he knew the old man was right. He had crossed the line without realizing it. This was no longer admiration, no longer simple friendship. Somewhere between shared meals, repaired tables, crowded bus rides, and quiet evening conversations, he had fallen deeply in love. Yet the woman who occupied his thoughts every waking moment didn't know the biggest truth about him. She believed he was an ordinary bricklayer struggling to survive. She had no idea that the dusty boots he wore each day belonged to one of the richest men in Enugu, and with every passing day revealing that truth became more difficult than the day before. Because the more he loved Amara, the more he feared losing her when she finally discovered the man beneath the dust. The months passed faster than Chinidu had expected. What had begun as a 6-month experiment had become a completely different life. He no longer woke up, missing the comfort of his luxurious mansion. The tiny one-room apartment he rented had become home. The neighbors greeted him every morning. The elderly woman living next door often called him over whenever she cooked too much soup. Children in the compound waved excitedly whenever they saw him returning from work with his dusty backpack. Nobody knew he owned private jets. Nobody knew he could buy the entire neighborhood without emptying his bank account. To them, he was simply Chinidu, the hard-working bricklayer who never refused to help anyone. Oddly enough, he had never felt richer. Every morning, Papa Musa and Solo waited for him at the bus stop. Every afternoon, Amara welcomed him with a smile that somehow made the exhaustion of construction work disappear. Life had become simple, peaceful, real. But while Chinidu had been discovering happiness among ordinary people, another story was unfolding inside the towering headquarters of Okeke Construction Group, and it was one that threatened everything he had built. Inside the company's boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. The long mahogany table was surrounded by senior executives. Financial reports lay open before them. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. At the head of the table sat Chief Vincent Nankwo, Chinidu's uncle. Unlike Chinidu, Chief Nankwo had always believed that money existed for only one purpose: power. He had served as a minority shareholder in the company for years, but he had always resented the fact that his much younger nephew controlled the empire. Now, Chinidu's mysterious disappearance had presented him with the opportunity he had been waiting for. He folded his hands dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have ignored a serious problem for too long. One executive frowned. What problem, Chief? The chairman. The room fell silent. Another board member adjusted his glasses. Mr. Okeke informed us through Barrister Emma that he was taking a private leave. Chief Nankwo smiled coldly. A private leave? Does that sound like responsible leadership to you? No one answered. He continued. Our chairman has disappeared for almost 4 months. No public appearances, no investor meetings, no inspections, No interviews, nothing. He leaned forward. What if he never comes back? The words settled heavily over the room. Several directors exchanged worried looks. Chief Nwanko immediately recognized the uncertainty growing among them. It was exactly what he wanted. He continued carefully. Our foreign partners are beginning to ask questions. Government officials want meetings. Journalists are becoming suspicious. If this continues, our investors may lose confidence. One elderly director sighed. What do you suggest? Chief Nwanko smiled. I suggest we begin discussing temporary leadership, exactly where he wanted the conversation to go. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, Chinidu was completely unaware of the storm gathering around his company. He was balancing a wheelbarrow full of cement across uneven ground while Solo walked beside him. Careful, Solo laughed. If you spill that load, the supervisor will make you mix another one. I've learned my lesson. You said that yesterday. Both men laughed. Life at the construction site continued as though nothing in the world had changed. When the lunch whistle blew, the workers eagerly headed toward Amara's stall. As always, she welcomed them warmly. Today's special is a goosey soup. Cheers erupted. Sola rubbed his hands together dramatically. This is why I come to work. You don't come to work to earn money. I come to eat. The workers burst into laughter. Amara shook her head. You'll never change. She handed Chinidu his plate. I added extra meat. He looked surprised. Why? She smiled. You've been working harder lately. He laughed. So, you've been watching me? She quickly looked away. I notice everyone. Papa Musa smiled quietly from across the table. The old man noticed far more than either of them realized. That evening, heavy rain delayed everyone from leaving. The laborers gathered beneath the shelter while waiting for the storm to pass. Rain hammered loudly against the zinc roof. Lightning flashed across the dark sky. The atmosphere felt peaceful. One by one, the workers began sharing stories. Sola described how he had once accidentally mixed salt into cement instead of sand because he had been distracted. Everyone laughed until tears rolled down their faces. Another laborer admitted he had once fallen asleep inside an unfinished building during lunch break and accidentally spent the entire night there. Even the supervisor laughed. Finally, someone looked toward Chinidu. What about you? Tell us something. He smiled. My life isn't very interesting. We don't believe you. Papa Musa nodded. Everyone has a story. For a brief moment, Chinidu considered telling them the truth. That he had once negotiated billionaire contracts. That presidents of banks personally called him. That newspapers wrote about every business decision he made. Instead, he simply smiled. I grew up poor. That part was true. My mother sold vegetables. My father died when I was young. The workers listened quietly. I promised myself that one day I'd build something meaningful. Papa Musa nodded approvingly. A good dream. What happened? Chinidu looked toward the rain. I'm still building. Again, it wasn't a lie. Not entirely. Later that night, after helping Amara close her stall, they slowly walked toward the bus stop together. The streets glistened from the rain. Small puddles reflected the streetlights. Children jumped across them while laughing. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Amara broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Of course. You've never talked about your family. Chinidu hesitated. He hated lying to her. Yet revealing the truth would end everything. My parents are gone. I'm sorry. I have no brothers or sisters. That was another lie. He had cousins and extended family, though no siblings. And you? She smiled sadly. My father died 2 years ago. I know. The workers told me. She nodded. He taught me everything. Cooking, saving, treating people well. She laughed softly. He used to say, if you become rich but lose your kindness, you've actually become poor. Chinidu smiled. He was a wise man. I miss him every day. Without thinking, he gently reached for her hand. She looked at him. Neither of them spoke. For several seconds, they simply walked together. Her hand remained in his, felt completely natural. Neither rushed to pull away. When they reached her street, she slowly released his hand. Good night, Chinidu. Good night. As she disappeared into the darkness, Chinidu stood smiling to himself. He had never imagined that holding someone's hand could bring so much happiness. The following morning, trouble quietly arrived. Not at the construction site, but at Chinidu's apartment. A black SUV stopped a few streets away. Barrister Emma stepped out. Unlike previous months, he wasn't smiling. He looked worried, very worried. After asking several people for directions, he finally located Chinidu's building. He knocked softly. When Chinidu opened the door, surprise covered his face. "Emeka, you shouldn't be here. We need to talk." Immediately, Chinidu sensed something was wrong. He invited his lawyer inside. The tiny room shocked Emma despite already knowing about Chinidu's living conditions. One plastic chair, a narrow bed, simple cooking utensils, no luxury, no comfort. The lawyer looked around in disbelief. "You've really been living like this," Chinidu smiled. "I'm alive. That's not the point. What happened?" Emma remained standing. "The company is in trouble." The smile disappeared from Chinidu's face. "What kind of trouble?" "Your uncle." Immediately, Chinidu understood. "Chief Nankwo," Emma nodded. "He's making his move." "How bad?" "Worse than I expected." He placed several newspapers on the table. Large headlines filled the front pages. "Where is Billionaire CEO Chinidu Okeke? Investors question mysterious disappearance. Is OK Construction facing a leadership crisis?" Another article carried an even more alarming headline. "Board considers new chairman." Chinidu slowly picked up one newspaper. His expression darkened. "He actually did it." Emma nodded. "He has convinced several shareholders that you've abandoned the company. I gave them permission to say I was on leave. That explanation worked for a while, but 4 months is becoming difficult to defend." "What about the board? Some still support you. Others are beginning to panic, and investors, they're asking questions. Several contracts have been delayed." Chinidu sat quietly. For the first time since beginning his disguise, reality came crashing back. He wasn't simply a bricklayer. He was responsible for thousands of employees, hundreds of ongoing projects, families who depended on his company. His silence could no longer continue forever. Emma leaned forward. "You need to come back. I know you need to reveal yourself. I know the board has scheduled an emergency shareholders meeting next week. If you don't appear..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Chinidu already understood. Chief Nankwo would seize control. Years of hard work could disappear overnight. After Emma left, Chinidu walked slowly toward the construction site. His heart felt heavier than the bags of cement he carried each day. Throughout the morning, he struggled to concentrate. He mixed mortar incorrectly twice. He almost dropped a stack of blocks. Even Sola noticed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. That's a lie. I'm just tired." Papa Musa quietly observed him, but said nothing. The old man had lived long enough to recognize worry when he saw it. During lunch, Amara immediately sensed something had changed. "You hardly touched your food." "I'm not very hungry." She frowned. "Are you sick?" "No, you don't look all right." He forced a smile. "I'll be fine." She didn't seem convinced. After the workers returned to the site, she quietly walked over carrying a bottle of water. "You've been somewhere else all day." He accepted the bottle. "Thank you. If something is bothering you, you don't have to carry it alone." Her words almost broke him. He wanted to tell her everything, that he wasn't really a laborer, that his company was falling apart, that he might disappear from her life within days. Instead, he simply whispered, "I wish things were that simple." She looked at him with concern. "Whatever it is, I hope it gets better." He nodded slowly. "So do I." That evening, Chinidu climbed onto the roof of the unfinished building after everyone had gone home. From there, he could see the lights of Enugu stretching into the distance. Somewhere beyond those lights stood his mansion, his corporate headquarters, his luxurious life, a life he had willingly left behind. Below him sat the construction site where he had discovered genuine friendship, where Papa Musa had become a father figure, where Sola had become a brother, where he had met the woman he loved. 2 completely different worlds, one filled with unimaginable wealth, the other filled with ordinary people whose hearts were richer than anything money could buy. Now those 2 worlds were about to collide, and for the first time since beginning his journey, Chinidu realized he could no longer keep them apart. The billionaire would soon have to return, but he wasn't afraid of losing his fortune. He was afraid of something far more precious. He was afraid that when Amara discovered the truth, that the humble bricklayer she had trusted was actually one of the richest men in Enugu, she would never look at him the same way again. The thought haunted him as darkness settled over the city. because sometimes the heaviest burden a man carries is not a bag of cement on his shoulders. It is the secret hidden inside his heart. Chinidu barely slept. He spent the entire night staring at the cracked ceiling of his tiny rented room while Barrister Emma's words echoed endlessly in his mind. You need to come back. The company is in trouble. The board has scheduled an emergency shareholders meeting. Every path before him led to pain. If he remained a bricklayer, he would lose the company he had spent years building from nothing. Thousands of employees depended on him. Entire families relied on the salaries paid by Okeke Construction Group. Walking away was no longer an option. But if he returned as Chinidu Okeke, billionaire chairman of one of Nigeria's largest construction companies, he would almost certainly lose Amara. He turned onto his side and closed his eyes. Instead of sleeping, memories filled his mind. The first plate of rice she had given him when he had no money, the way she had trusted him without asking questions. The afternoons they spent laughing while he repaired her broken tables. The handwritten note she had tucked into the container of fried plantain. The evening they had walked home together in the rain. The first time she had quietly held his hand. Every memory made the decision even harder. Before dawn, Chinidu finally got up. He knelt beside the bed and bowed his head. For several minutes he said nothing. Then he whispered softly, God, I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am. I never wanted to hurt her. If I've made a mistake, please help me make it right. That morning, the construction site felt strangely quiet. Even Sola noticed Chinidu wasn't himself. You've been looking like someone who lost a football final. Chinidu forced a smile. I'll be all right. Papa Musa watched him carefully. The elderly bricklayer had spent decades reading people's faces. He knew this wasn't ordinary worry. Something important had changed. After several hours of work, Papa Musa walked over while Chinidu was stacking blocks. Walk with me. The two men moved toward a quieter corner of the site. The old man leaned against an unfinished wall. I've been watching you. Chinidu smiled faintly. I know you're carrying more than cement these days. Silence followed. Finally, Chinidu spoke. What if you had to tell someone a truth that might make them hate you? Papa Musa didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a loose brick lying nearby. He held it in his weathered hands. Do you know why buildings crack? Chinidu looked at the brick. There are many reasons. The old man nodded. Yes, but one of the most common is hidden weakness. A wall may look perfect outside, but if something is wrong inside, one day it will break. He gently placed the brick down. Relationships are the same. If a truth remains buried for too long, it becomes heavier every day. Chinidu lowered his eyes. So, I should tell her? Papa Musa smiled kindly. You should always give people the chance to choose with the whole truth. Those words settled deeply into Chinidu's heart. Around noon, as everyone gathered beneath the mango tree, Amara immediately noticed the sadness in his face. You barely smiled today. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. She handed him his usual plate. Just promise you'll eat. He nodded. I will. For several minutes they remained quiet. Finally, Chinidu spoke. Amara. She looked up. Can we talk after work? Her smile faded slightly. Of course. Is everything all right? I hope so. She studied him for a moment. I'll wait. The rest of the afternoon seemed endless. Every minute felt like an hour. Chinidu repeatedly rehearsed what he wanted to say. My name is Chinidu Okeke. I own the construction company. I pretended to be poor because I wanted someone to love me for who I really am. Every version sounded worse than the last. How could he explain months of deception without sounding like a man who had manipulated her feelings? By the time work ended, his heart was pounding. He helped Amara pack away the tables in silence. She finally looked at him. You're frightening me. I'm sorry. You keep saying sorry. What happened? He took a deep breath. I need to tell you something. Before he could continue, the loud sound of engines echoed from the road. Everyone turned. A convoy of black SUVs sped toward the construction site. Behind them came television vans, police escort vehicles, journalists carrying cameras. Workers stopped what they were doing. The supervisor frowned. What's going on? The convoy rolled to a stop, directly beside the unfinished building. Several well-dressed men stepped out. One of them was Barrister Emma. The moment he saw Chinidu, he hurried forward. Sir. The single word froze everyone. Sola blinked. Sir. Papa Musa looked confused. Even Amara frowned. Barrister Emma spoke urgently. We've been looking everywhere. The shareholders are already gathering. We have to leave immediately. Chinidu's heart sank. This couldn't wait. I'm sorry. It couldn't. Several journalists noticed the exchange. One cameraman looked closely at Chinidu. His eyes widened. Wait, that's him. Within seconds, microphones were raised. Cameras switched on. Television reporters rushed forward. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Chinidu Okeke, is it true you've been hiding for months?" Another yelled, "Why were you disguised as a construction worker?" Another asked, "Are the rumors about your company true?" The construction site fell completely silent. Every laborer stared at Chinidu. No one spoke. No one moved. Sola looked as though he had forgotten how to breathe. Papa Moose's mouth slowly opened in disbelief. The supervisor removed his helmet. Amara simply stood there, her eyes fixed on Chinidu. Confusion slowly turned into shock. The television reporter continued speaking directly into the camera. "We have just made an unbelievable discovery. Missing billionaire businessman Chinidu Okeke has been found working as a bricklayer at one of his own construction sites." The words echoed across the construction site. Several laborers looked from the television camera back to Chinidu, then back again. One whispered, "Our Chinidu?" Another shook his head. "It can't be." Sola laughed nervously. "Someone tell me this is a joke." No one answered because it wasn't. Barrister Emma gently touched Chinidu's shoulder. "We need to go." But Chinidu wasn't looking at the cameras. He wasn't looking at the lawyers. He wasn't looking at the convoy. He was looking only at Amara. The pain in her eyes hurt more than anything he had ever experienced. She took one slow step toward him. "You?" Her voice trembled. "You're Chinidu, okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." "The billionaire?" "Yes." Silence. She searched his face as though hoping he would deny everything. "You own this company?" "Yes." Her breathing became uneven the entire time. "You knew I wanted to tell you." When she looked around helplessly. After another lie, after another month, after she couldn't finish the sentence. The workers quietly stepped back, sensing this conversation was no longer theirs to witness. Amara's eyes filled with tears. So every single day, every conversation, everything was fake. "No." His voice broke. "None of my feelings were fake. But your life was. I know. You lied to me. I was afraid." She laughed bitterly through her tears. "Afraid? You had billions. I had nothing. What exactly were you afraid of?" He struggled to answer. "I wanted someone to love me." Before knowing who I was, she stared at him. "So, you tested me?" "No. I wanted the truth and you couldn't tell me yours." Her words struck like blows. "I never meant to hurt you, but you did." She stepped backward. "I trusted you. I know. I defended you. I believed every word you said. I know. You let me believe you were struggling to survive. I know. And all this time you were one of the richest men in Enugu." Tears rolled freely down her face. The cameras continued recording from a distance. Even the reporters had stopped asking questions. The emotional confrontation unfolding before them was far more powerful than any interview. Papa Musa quietly removed his cap. He closed his eyes. The old man had suspected Chinidu carried a secret. He had never imagined it would be this. Sola remained frozen. He remembered every joke, every nickname, every lunch they had shared together. His best friend on the construction site was actually a billionaire. Amara wiped her tears. "You know what hurts the most?" Chinidu looked at her silently. "I don't even know which parts of you were real anymore. They were all real. Were they? The laughter real, the friendship real, the evenings we walked together real. The way you looked at me, his voice cracked. The most real thing I've ever felt." For a brief second, her expression softened. Then she remembered the months of deception. "You should have trusted me. I wanted to." "No, you wanted to control the story." She slowly removed the small friendship bracelet she had once woven from colorful thread and tied around his wrist as a joke several weeks earlier. She held it for a moment, then gently placed it into his hand. "I can't do this." His heart shattered. "Amara." She shook her head. "I need time." She turned away. Every instinct inside Chinidu wanted to run after her to explain everything, to make her understand. But his feet refused to move. He watched helplessly as she walked away from the construction site. Without looking back, without saying another word, the silence she left behind felt louder than the reporters' cameras. After several minutes, Papa Musa slowly approached. The old bricklayer looked at Chinidu with sadness rather than anger. You should go. I'm sorry. Papa Musa nodded gently. I know, but some wounds need time before they can heal. Sola finally walked over. I don't even know what to call you anymore. Chinidu managed a weak smile. You can still call me Chinidu. Sola shook his head in disbelief. You carried blocks with us. You ate with us. You laughed with us. Why? Because I wanted to know what life really looked like. Sola stared at him. Then unexpectedly he smiled faintly. Well, you were terrible on your first day. Despite everything, Chinidu laughed. So did Sola. For a brief moment the tension eased. Then reality returned. Barrister Emma stepped forward once more. Sir, we're late. This time, Chinidu nodded. He climbed into the waiting SUV. As the convoy slowly drove away, he looked back through the rear window. The construction site grew smaller. Papa Musa stood silently with his cap in his hands. Sola remained beside the unfinished building, and beneath the mango tree, Amara's food stall stood empty. The place where he had found hope now felt unbearably distant. As the convoy disappeared into the busy streets of Enugu, television stations across Nigeria interrupted their regular programming. Breaking news banners flashed across every screen. Missing billionaire found working as a bricklayer. The country celebrated the unbelievable story. Social media exploded with excitement. News anchors called it one of the most extraordinary stories of the year. But inside the luxury SUV, none of that mattered to Chinidu. The entire nation had just rediscovered its billionaire. Yet in the very same moment, the woman he loved had lost the man she thought she knew. And for the first time since building his billion-naira empire, Chinidu realized that some losses could never be measured in money, because the most valuable thing he had ever found was not hidden inside a bank account. It had been waiting beneath a mango tree. And now, because of one painful truth revealed too late, he feared he had lost it forever. The black SUV sped through the streets of Enugu, escorted by police vehicles with flashing lights. Inside, Chinidu sat silently in the back seat, staring through the tinted window. The city looked exactly the same. Street vendors still called out to customers. Commercial buses fought for space on crowded roads. School children laughed as they walked home. Life continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet for Chinidu, everything had changed in a single afternoon. He had regained his identity, but he had lost the woman he loved. Barrister Emma glanced at him from the front seat. You've been quiet. Chinidu managed a faint smile. I don't think there's much to say. You did what you had to do. Maybe, but it still cost me. Emma understood immediately. Amara, Chinidu nodded. I should have told her sooner. You were afraid. I know, but fear isn't an excuse. The lawyer sighed, perhaps not. For the remainder of the journey, neither man spoke. By the time the convoy reached the headquarters of Okeke Construction Group, hundreds of journalists had gathered outside the towering glass building. Cameras flashed non-stop. Security officers struggled to hold back reporters eager to ask questions. The moment Chinidu stepped out of the vehicle, microphones surrounded him. Mr. Okeke, why did you disappear? Were you really working as a bricklayer? Is your company in financial trouble? Did your board know where you were? Questions came from every direction. Normally, Chinidu handled the media with confidence. Today, however, he barely heard them. His thoughts remained fixed on a dusty roadside food stall beneath a mango tree. Barrister Emma stepped forward. The chairman will address the media after the shareholders' meeting. With that, security escorted Chinidu into the building. Inside the executive lobby, employees stopped working the moment they saw him. For several seconds, complete silence filled the room. Then, applause erupted. Some staff members wiped away tears. Others smiled with obvious relief. Welcome back, sir. We've missed you. It's good to see you again. Chinidu shook hands with several employees before heading toward the executive elevator. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection in the polished steel. He was no longer wearing dusty work clothes. His beard had been trimmed. His hair was neatly cut. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. An expensive wristwatch rested on his arm once more. To everyone else, he looked like the billionaire chairman they remembered. But when he looked into the mirror, he still saw the bricklayer. He still felt the weight of cement on his shoulders. He still remembered the laughter of ordinary laborers. Money had changed his appearance again. It hadn't changed his heart. The emergency board meeting began immediately. Every seat around the long mahogany table was occupied. The atmosphere was tense. Chief Vincent Nankwo leaned back comfortably in his chair. He smiled politely when Chinidu entered. "Well, the missing chairman returns." Chinidu ignored the remark. He took his seat at the head of the table. Barrister Emma quietly distributed several folders. One board member cleared his throat. "Mr. Oki, perhaps you should explain." Chinidu stood. He looked around the room. Some faces appeared relieved. Others looked skeptical. "My disappearance created uncertainty. I take full responsibility." Murmurs spread across the room. Several directors shifted uncomfortably. Chinidu remained calm. "I never abandoned the company. I monitored every major decision. I approved important contracts. I remained in daily communication with Barrister Emma." He nodded toward his lawyer. Emma immediately projected several documents onto the large screen. Emails, digital approvals, electronic signatures, video conference records. Every important business decision carried Chinidu's authorization. The room fell silent. Chief Nankwo's smile faded slightly. One director adjusted his glasses. "So, you remained involved?" "Yes. I simply chose not to appear publicly." Chief Nwankwo stood. "That doesn't excuse your absence." "No, it doesn't. But neither does spreading false information." The room became quiet. Chief Nankwo frowned. "What are you implying?" Without saying a word, Barrister Emma pressed another button. A series of financial records appeared. Private emails, internal memos, bank transfer reports, one after another. Each document exposed attempts to manipulate shareholders into believing Chinidu had abandoned the company. Several messages carried Chief Nwankwo's personal authorization. Gasps spread across the room. One board member looked horrified. "You tried to create panic." Chief Nwankwo immediately protested. "I was protecting the company." "No," Chinidu answered calmly. "You were trying to take it." The evidence spoke louder than any argument. Within minutes, the board voted unanimously. Chief Nwankwo was suspended pending a full investigation. As security officers escorted him toward the door, he turned back angrily. "You think you've won?" Chinidu looked at him quietly. "No, if I had won, I wouldn't have lost someone important." Chief Nankwo looked confused. Then he laughed bitterly. "You gave up your company for a woman?" "I nearly lost both." Without another word, the disgraced businessman left. By evening, news of the board meeting dominated television stations across Nigeria. Business analysts praised Chinidu's leadership. Social media celebrated his unusual decision to live as an ordinary laborer. Many people called him humble. Others described him as inspiring. Television hosts debated whether his experiment proved that wealth disconnected people from reality. Yet amid all the praise, Chinidu felt strangely empty. His phone buzzed constantly. Government officials congratulated him. Business partners requested meetings. International investors praised his transparency. He ignored almost every message. Only one person's opinion mattered, and she wasn't calling. The next morning, life at the construction site felt completely different. The workers gathered beneath the mango tree as usual, but the cheerful atmosphere was gone. Nobody joked, nobody laughed. Amara quietly served food. Her smile had disappeared. She performed each task automatically. Several customers attempted to lighten the mood. Nothing worked. Sola finally spoke. "We miss him." Papa Musa nodded. "So do I." Another laborer sighed. "I still can't believe he was our chairman." The supervisor smiled faintly. "He carried blocks better than some of you." That earned a few weak laughs. Amara remained silent. She kept arranging plates. She tried to focus on work, but every corner of the stall reminded her of Chinidu. The repaired wooden table, the spice shelf he had bought, the bench he had fixed. Even the old hammer still rested where he had left it. Everything whispered his name. She hated it. That evening, after closing the stall, Amara sat alone beneath the mango tree. The road had grown quiet. The last buses were passing by. She stared at the friendship bracelet she had removed from Chinidu's wrist the previous day. She had expected to feel relieved. Instead, she felt confused. Her younger brother, Kelechi, walked over carrying his school bag. "You haven't gone home." She looked up. "I needed some air." He sat beside her. "I saw the news." She nodded. "So, he really is a billionaire?" "Yes." Kelechi remained silent for a moment. "Do you still love him?" The question caught her completely off guard. "I don't know." You do? She looked at her brother. How can you be so sure? Because you're angry. She frowned. What does that mean? If you didn't love him, you wouldn't be hurting this much. She looked away. Perhaps he was right. She wasn't angry because Chinidu was rich. She was angry because he had hidden the truth, because he hadn't trusted her enough to tell her. The following Sunday, Amara attended church with her family. She struggled to concentrate throughout the service. Even the pastor's sermon seemed directed at her. He spoke about forgiveness, about honesty, about judging people's hearts rather than their mistakes. His words lingered long after the service ended. On her way home, she passed a small playground. A familiar sight made her stop. An elderly woman struggled to lift a heavy basket into a taxi. Without thinking, Amara hurried over to help. As they finished loading the basket, the old woman smiled gratefully. Thank you, my daughter. Amara smiled politely. Then suddenly, she froze. Helping strangers, fixing broken things, carrying heavy loads without complaining. She had admired those qualities in Chinidu every single day. None of those moments had been fake. He had genuinely helped people. He had genuinely cared. He had never acted superior. He had laughed with laborers, shared meals, accepted hardship. No one had forced him to do any of that. He had chosen it. That realization unsettled her. Later that afternoon, Papa Musa visited her stall. The elderly bricklayer ordered his usual meal before quietly sitting down. After several minutes, he spoke. You're thinking about him, Amara sighed. Everyone keeps saying that because it's true. She looked down. He lied. Yes, he deceived me. Yes, he made me believe he was someone else. Papa Musa nodded slowly. He did. She looked at the old man. Then why does everyone seem ready to forgive him? Papa Musa smiled gently. Because we saw the man he chose to become. She frowned. What do you mean? The elderly bricklayer leaned back. My daughter. I've worked with rich men for 40 years. Most of them visit construction sites wearing polished shoes. They stay 5 minutes, take photographs, then leave. He paused. Your Chinidu carried blocks. He mixed cement. He ate our food. He shared our struggles. He never treated us like servants. He lived exactly as we lived. Papa Musa's voice softened. Do you know how difficult that is for someone who has everything? Amara remained silent. I am not defending his lie, the old man continued. He should have trusted you. But don't let one mistake erase every truth you already know. What truth? He smiled. The way he looked at you, the way he spoke to you, the way he helped you when no one was watching. You cannot pretend those things for 4 months. Amara slowly lowered her eyes. She remembered every moment. The repaired tables, the homemade shelf, the rainy evenings, the crowded buses, the conversations, the laughter. None of it had felt forced. For the first time since discovering his secret, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding. Had Chinidu lied because he wanted to manipulate her? Or had he lied because he was desperately afraid of never being loved for who he truly was? The answer wasn't simple, but one thing became painfully clear. Her heart was no longer as certain as it had been the day she walked away. Perhaps beneath the biggest lie of his life, there had also been the greatest truth. A lonely man searching for genuine love. And somewhere inside her own heart, the anger that had seemed so certain only days before began to make room for something she had been unwilling to consider: understanding. A full week passed after the truth about Chinidu became national news. Across Nigeria, newspapers continued to publish stories about the billionaire who had disguised himself as a bricklayer. Television stations replayed the footage of him carrying concrete blocks and pushing wheelbarrows. Radio presenters debated whether his unusual experiment was foolish or brilliant. Social media was flooded with opinions. Some people praised his humility. Others criticized him for deceiving everyone around him. Countless strangers argued over whether love built on a hidden identity could ever survive. But far away from the cameras and headlines, Chinidu wasn't thinking about public opinion. He was thinking about Amara. Every morning, he found himself looking at his phone, hoping to see her name appear on the screen, and never did. He had typed dozens of messages over the past week. Can we talk? Deleted. I'm sorry for hurting you. Deleted. Please let me explain. Deleted. Nothing seemed good enough. No collection of words could erase months of silence. Meanwhile, life inside Okeke Construction Group had returned to its normal pace. Meetings resumed. Contracts were signed. Investors regained confidence. The company's share value recovered quickly after the board publicly announced that Chief Vincent Nankwo had been suspended and placed under investigation for attempting to manipulate shareholders. Employees once again filled the executive floors with energy. Yet, everyone noticed one thing: their chairman had changed. The cheerful businessman who had once inspired entire conference rooms now rarely smiled. During meetings, he remained focused but unusually quiet. He often stared out of the window for several moments before responding to simple questions. His assistant, Ioma, noticed it immediately. One afternoon, after a long meeting with foreign investors, she entered his office carrying several documents. "Sir," Chinidu looked up. "Yes, you forgot to sign these. I'm sorry." She placed the papers on his desk, but made no move to leave. Instead, she hesitated. "Can I say something?" He smiled faintly. "You've worked with me for years. You don't need permission." She folded her hands. "I've never seen you like this." He looked away toward the city skyline. "I suppose that's because I've never been like this." "It's her, isn't it?" He laughed softly. "Is it really that obvious?" She nodded. "Everyone in the office knows. Beside, I built an empire, but I couldn't build enough courage to tell one woman the truth. You were afraid. I was. And now I'm afraid it's too late." I smiled gently. "My grandmother used to tell me something." "What?" "If a seed is planted in good soil, one storm cannot kill it." Chinidu thanked her after she left. Her words remained in his mind for the rest of the afternoon. Across town, life had become equally difficult for Amara. She had reopened her food stall the morning after discovering Chinidu's true identity. Customers returned. Business continued outwardly. Everything appeared normal, but the workers who visited every afternoon noticed the difference immediately. The cheerful laughter that once filled the stall had faded. Amara still smiled, but it was no longer effortless. She often found herself staring absent-mindedly toward the construction site before quickly returning to work. One afternoon, Sola arrived carrying his lunch plate. He glanced around. "It feels strange." Amara looked up. "What does lunch without Chinidu?" Silence settled between them. Finally, Amara spoke. "How are the others?" "They miss him." She nodded quietly. "And Papa Musa?" "The old man says the site became too quiet." A faint smile crossed her face. "He would say that." Sola hesitated before continuing. "You know, we've all been talking." She looked curious. "About what? About him?" She said nothing. We were shocked. So was I. But after the surprise disappeared, we realized something. "What?" Sola smiled. "He never behaved like a rich man." Amara lowered her eyes. "No. He behaved like one of us." That simple sentence echoed inside her long after Sola returned to the construction site. 2 days later, Chinidu made a decision. He could no longer sit in his office waiting. Whether she forgave him or not, she deserved to hear the whole truth. Not through reporters, not through newspaper headlines from him. That evening, after changing into simple clothes, he drove alone toward the familiar roadside where Amara's stall stood. He deliberately left his security team behind. He didn't want flashing sirens or expensive convoys. He wanted to arrive as quietly as possible. When he parked several streets away, his heart pounded harder than it ever had during Billionaire negotiations. As he walked closer, he saw Amara serving customers beneath the mango tree. Nothing had changed. The repaired tables remained. The spice shelf still stood against the wooden frame. The blue canopy fluttered gently in the evening breeze. Only one thing felt different. The place no longer felt like home. He waited patiently until the last customer left. When Amara finally looked up and saw him standing there, surprise flashed across her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she quietly wiped her hands with a towel. "You came." "I did. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." She looked toward the empty chairs. "Sit." He slowly took a seat. She remained standing for several seconds before sitting opposite him. The silence felt heavy. Finally, Chinidu spoke. "I owe you the truth. You already told me who you are." "No, I told you what I owned. I never told you why." She looked at him without speaking. He took a deep breath. "When I was 25, I fell in love." She looked surprised. "I wanted to marry her. But one day, I overheard her telling her friend that she didn't love me. She loved my money." He paused. After that, every relationship became the same. He described the expensive gifts, the demands, The women who discussed luxury cars before discussing marriage, the constant fear that no one saw the man behind the fortune. I became terrified, he admitted. Terrified that I would spend my entire life wondering if anyone could ever love me without first seeing my bank account. Amara listened quietly. I know hiding my identity was wrong. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. His voice became softer. But every smile I gave you was real. Every conversation was real. Every time I repaired something, I wanted to help. I never pretended to care about you. I cared far more than I ever planned to. For several moments, Samara remained silent. Then she finally spoke. Do you know what hurt me most? He nodded slowly. The lie. She shook her head. No. He looked surprised. What hurt me most was realizing you didn't believe I deserved the truth. He closed his eyes briefly. You're right. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting myself, but I ended up hurting the person I wanted to protect most. Tears gathered in Amara's eyes. I trusted you. I know. I believed every word you said. I know. She looked directly into his eyes. If I had discovered your identity 6 months from now, would you still have kept lying? The question pierced him. No. When would you have told me? He answered honestly. I don't know. She nodded sadly. That's what frightened me. Not the money, not the deception itself, the uncertainty. For the first time, Chinidu truly understood the depth of her pain. Before either of them could continue, loud voices echoed from the construction site across the road. Several workers hurried toward the stall. Solo was leading them. Papa Musa followed behind. The elderly bricklayer smiled when he saw both of them sitting together. We're sorry to interrupt. Amara stood. Is everything all right? The workers wanted to say goodbye. She looked confused. Goodbye. Zola grinned. The project is finished. We start at another site tomorrow. One by one, the laborers gathered beneath the mango tree. Many hugged Era. Others thanked her for months of affordable meals. Then Sola turned toward Chinidu. So, Chairman, the workers laughed. It still sounds strange. Chinidu smiled. It does. Papa Musa stepped forward. The old bricklayer looked at both Chinidu and Amara before addressing everyone. I've spent 40 years laying bricks. I've learned one important lesson. The workers became quiet. You can build the strongest wall in the world, but if the foundation is weak, the wall will eventually fall. He looked at Chinidu. You built your relationship on a weak foundation. Chinidu lowered his head. Yes. Then Papa Musa looked toward Amara. But foundations can be repaired. Silence followed. The old man smiled. If both builders are willing, he stepped back. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Sola clapped once. Papa Musa always knows how to make us think. The workers laughed softly. The tension eased. After everyone left, only Chinidu and Amara remained beneath the mango tree. The evening sky glowed orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills of Enugu. Birds flew across the fading light. The road had grown unusually quiet. Amara looked toward the unfinished building one last time. It feels strange. What does? Knowing the project is over. He smiled. It doesn't have to be. She looked at him. What do you mean? The workers are moving. But maybe he hesitated. We don't have to. She smiled faintly. You always were hopeful. I learned that from you. Silence returned. Finally, she reached into her apron pocket. She removed something carefully wrapped in a handkerchief. The colorful friendship bracelet, the same one she had returned to him on the day his secret was exposed. She held it in her hand for several seconds, then slowly reached across the table. I can't pretend the pain disappeared. I know. I can't promise everything will immediately go back to the way it was. I understand. She gently placed the bracelet back into his hand, but I'd like to try. For several seconds, Chinidu simply stared at it. He couldn't believe what was happening. You mean? She smiled through tears. I'm choosing the man who carried blocks. The man who repaired broken tables. The man who shared meals with laborers. The man who laughed with children. She looked directly into his eyes. The billionaire is only part of who you are. Tears filled Chinidu's eyes. Without saying another word, he carefully tied the bracelet around his wrist once again. This time, neither of them tried to hide their emotions. They sat quietly beneath the mango tree as the last rays of sunlight faded across the Enugu skyline. For the first time since the painful truth had been revealed, hope returned. Their story was no longer perfect. Trust would take time to rebuild. Forgiveness would require patience. But love, Ray, all love had survived the greatest test either of them had ever faced. Because in the end, Amara had not chosen a billionaire. She had chosen the humble bricklayer whose heart she had fallen in love with long before she ever knew the size of his bank account. And Chinidu finally understood that the greatest wealth he would ever possess was not hidden inside his company's accounts. It was sitting across from him, beneath a simple mango tree, choosing him, not because of what he owned, but because of who he had become. 6 months later, the city of Enugu had never looked more beautiful. The morning sun cast a golden glow across the rolling hills as church bells echoed softly through the cool air. Streets were decorated with colorful flowers, white ribbons, and banners welcoming guests from across Nigeria. Hotels were fully booked. Restaurants overflowed with visitors. Business leaders arrived in luxury convoys. Construction workers boarded buses wearing their finest traditional attire. Television stations set up cameras outside one of the city's most beautiful event centers. Everyone was talking about the same wedding, the marriage of billionaire businessman Chinidu Okeke and Amara. But unlike many celebrity weddings filled with unnecessary extravagance, this celebration carried a story that had touched the hearts of millions. It wasn't simply the union of a billionaire and the woman he loved. It was the celebration of a love that had survived deception, heartbreak, forgiveness, and the greatest test of all, truth. Inside a beautifully decorated bridal suite, Amara stood before a large mirror as two women adjusted the final details of her elegant white wedding gown. The dress was simple compared to the extravagant gowns many wealthy brides preferred. It featured delicate lace sleeves, a flowing satin skirt, and a long veil embroidered with tiny pearls. She wore only a pair of pearl earrings and a modest necklace. When one of the makeup artists suggested adding heavier jewelry, Amara smiled politely. "I think this is enough. It is your wedding day." "I know. I just want to feel like myself." The makeup artist nodded with admiration. Even surrounded by luxury, Amara had not changed. Her younger brother, Kelechi, knocked gently before entering. For a moment, he simply stared. "You look." He struggled to find the right word. Like Mom would have imagined. Tears instantly filled Amara's eyes. Their mother had passed away only a year after their father, leaving the siblings to rely on each other. She smiled through the emotion. "I wish they were here." Kelechi stepped forward and hugged her. "They are maybe not where we can see them, but today I know they're smiling." Across town, Chinidu stood in one of the guest rooms of the church, wearing an elegant white traditional outfit beneath a tailored ceremonial robe. Barrister Emma adjusted the collar while smiling. "I've negotiated contracts worth billions. I've watched you address thousands of people. I've never seen you this nervous." Chinidu laughed softly. "I've never wanted anything this much." Sola suddenly entered without knocking. "My chairman." Chinidu turned and smiled broadly. Sola looked almost unrecognizable in his neatly tailored navy blue senator outfit. "You clean up well. So do you." The two men laughed before embracing warmly. "You know," Sola said, 6 months ago I was teaching you how to push a wheelbarrow. And now you're asking me to be one of your groomsmen. You've earned it." Sol's smile softened. "You know, I'm still not completely over the fact that my best friend is a billionaire." Chinidu laughed. "I was always your friend. True. But now I know why your hands look too soft on your first day." They both laughed loudly. A gentle knock interrupted them. Papa Musa slowly entered. The elderly bricklayer wore a beautifully embroidered traditional outfit with a matching cap. He walked carefully toward Chinidu. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Papa Musa placed both hands on Chinidu's shoulders. "My son, I am proud of you." Emotion tightened Chinidu's throat. "I couldn't have done this without you." The old man smiled. "No, you could have. I simply reminded you to keep laying the right bricks." By midday, the church had filled beyond capacity. Guests included governors, traditional rulers, business executives, religious leaders, market traders, laborers, food vendors, and neighbors from Amara's old community. The seating arrangement itself reflected Chinidu's values. There were no special sections dividing wealthy guests from ordinary people. Construction workers sat beside company directors. Bricklayers laughed with senators. Everyone was treated equally. Several journalists noticed this unusual arrangement. One reporter whispered, "This may be the first billionaire wedding where laborers occupy the front rows." The music began. Everyone stood. The church doors slowly opened. Amara stepped inside. A collective gasp swept through the congregation. She walked gracefully down the aisle, holding a bouquet of white roses. Her eyes searched the crowd until they found Chinidu. The moment their eyes met, both smiled. Not the nervous smiles of strangers, the quiet smiles of two people who had already walked through pain together. As Amara reached the altar, Chinidu gently took her hands. "You look beautiful," she laughed softly. "You've said that 3 times already. I've been practicing." The congregation laughed warmly. The pastor smiled before beginning the ceremony. "We are gathered here today not merely to celebrate a marriage, but to celebrate a testimony." He looked toward the couple. "Many marriages begin with attraction. Some begin with friendship, but yours began with humility." Several guests nodded. The pastor continued, "Young man, you discovered that wealth could buy almost everything except genuine love." Then he turned toward Amara. "And young woman, you discovered that forgiveness often requires greater courage than anger." The church fell silent. The words resonated deeply with everyone present. When it came time to exchange vows, Chinidu took a deep breath. His voice trembled slightly. "Amara, the first day you fed me when I couldn't pay, you saw a hungry laborer. You didn't know I owned companies. You didn't know I lived in a mansion. You simply saw a human being who needed kindness." He smiled. "That moment changed my life. I promise that for the rest of our lives, I will never again hide the truth from you. I will protect your heart. I will respect your dreams, and I will love you with the same honesty you deserved from the beginning." Many guests quietly wiped away tears. Then Amara spoke. "When I met you, I thought I had found an ordinary bricklayer." She smiled. "It turns out I did." Several people looked confused before she continued. "The billionaire owns buildings. The bricklayer builds them. I fell in love with the builder. The title never mattered." Her eyes filled with tears. "I promise to love you. Whether we stand inside a mansion or beneath another mango tree." The church erupted into gentle applause. After exchanging rings, the pastor smiled broadly. "By the authority given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Chinidu gently cupped his face. Their kiss was soft, respectful, long enough to celebrate, short enough to remain elegant. Thunderous applause filled the church. The choir burst into joyful singing. Flower petals floated gently through the air. For the first time in many years, Chinidu felt completely whole. The reception took place at a magnificent outdoor garden overlooking the hills surrounding Enugu. Crystal chandeliers hung beneath transparent canopies. Fresh flowers decorated every table. A live orchestra played soft, high-life music while guests enjoyed traditional dishes from across southeastern Nigeria. But the greatest surprise came just before dinner. Chinidu stepped onto the stage holding a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, there are a few people I wish to honor." A large screen behind him lit up. Photographs appeared. Construction workers, bricklayers, laborers, Papa Musa, Sola, the very people who had unknowingly changed his life. Many guests looked confused. Chinidu smiled. "These men taught me something money never could. They taught me dignity. They taught me friendship. They reminded me that no honest work is beneath any man." He looked toward the front row. Papa Musa. The elderly bricklayer slowly stood. The audience applauded loudly. "You once shared your lunch with someone you believed was poor. You gave without expecting anything back. You treated me like a son before you knew my name." Papa Musa wiped away tears. "You deserve more than my gratitude." A representative from Okeke Construction Group wheeled out several sealed envelopes. Chinidu continued, "Today, every laborer who worked with me during those 6 months will receive a fully furnished 3-bedroom house." For several seconds, complete silence filled the reception hall. No one moved. No one spoke. Then gasps erupted across the audience. Several workers stared in disbelief. Sola almost dropped his glass. Papa Musa covered his mouth with trembling hands. Chinidu smiled warmly. "You helped build my happiness. Now it's my turn to help build your future." The audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Many laborers openly wept. Some embraced one another. Others fell to their knees in gratitude. Television cameras captured every emotional moment, but Chinidu wasn't finished. He looked toward Amara. And one more surprise. She looked puzzled. "What now?" He smiled. "You once told me your father dreamed that Kelechi would become an engineer." She nodded. He still does. Kelechi. The young man stood nervously. Beginning next semester. Your university education is fully funded. The audience applauded once more. And after graduation, if you still wish to become an engineer, there will always be a place for you at Okeke Construction Group. Kelechi's eyes filled with tears. He hurried onto the stage and embraced Chinidu tightly. Thank you. No. Chinidu smiled. Thank you for reminding your sister not to give up on me. Amara looked at her younger brother in surprise. You told him? Kelechi grinned sheepishly. I may have encouraged him to keep fighting. She laughed and hugged both men. Later that evening, as the celebration slowly drew to a close, Chinidu quietly led Amara away from the crowd. They climbed to the balcony of their new home, a magnificent mansion overlooking the lights of Enugu. The house was breathtaking. Marble floors reflected the warm glow of elegant chandeliers. Large glass windows overlooked beautifully landscaped gardens. A sparkling swimming pool shimmered under the moonlight. There was a private library, a music room, a home cinema, and spacious terraces with panoramic views of the city. But Amara was not looking at the gold, the chandeliers, or the luxury around her. She walked to the balcony instead, where the lights of Enugu stretched endlessly beneath the night sky. This was the same city where a lonely billionaire had once chosen to disappear. The same city where a humble food vendor had unknowingly changed his life forever. Chinidu stepped beside her and gently took her hand. Amara smiled softly. You know, you could have fallen in love with someone much easier. He looked at her. I lied to you. You did. I hurt you. You did. I almost lost you. Amara turned toward him, her eyes full of quiet emotion. But you came back. Chinidu nodded. And you forgave me. Not because the lie didn't matter, she said, resting her head against his shoulder, but because the truth beneath it mattered more. For a while they stood in silence, watching the lights of Enugu shimmer below them. Then Chinidu spoke softly. When I left the city pretending to be a poor bricklayer, I thought I was searching for true love. He smiled at his wife. I didn't realize true love was already searching for me. Amar intertwined her fingers with his. And where did it find you? He laughed quietly. Beneath a mango tree. Their journey had begun with dusty boots, broken tables, shared meals, and hidden truths. It ended with forgiveness, honesty, and a future built on something stronger than concrete. Buildings could grow old, walls could crack, and roofs could fade, but a home built on trust, humility, and genuine love could survive every storm. And as Enugu glittered beneath the stars, Chinidu finally understood the greatest lesson of his life. The finest mansion he would ever build would not be made of marble, glass, or steel. It would be the life he and Amara built together, one honest brick at a time.